Hi, Brad here with Pulse Sound again. We're going to do a couple tutorials that have been requested by one of our viewers. We appreciate their input and their comments. And so they've requested that we do a basic overview of all of the buttons and controls on both the fader and the master units of the Nuage system. So that's what we'll focus on today. Again, this will be a brief overview of these functions, and our intent is we will go back through in later tutorials and narrow in and spend some time discussing in detail what each of these functions and sections will do. But we'll go ahead and get started with the overview. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the master unit. The top section of the master unit is your touch screen, and to the right of the touch screen we have 6 buttons. I'll just briefly go over those. If you hit setup, that pulls up a menu to adjust your various parameters. These parameters affect your Nuage hardware unit themselves. So if you want to adjust your touch sensitivity or your brightness of the screens or the LEDs and those kind of things, that's where you'd make those adjustments. Track list, it gives you a quick overview of all of your tracks. You can do things such as mute, solo, track arming. You can arm all or unarm all under this track list page. Channel, this would be an overview of whatever channel is selected, and you notice there are 7 tabs at the top of this screen. I've got my bass channel selected, and so we can see my high pass or my low pass filter. I can adjust my gain, my phase or polarity, those types of parameters. And then I can jump to my EQ or my dynamics or my sends page, whatever I need to get to quickly. Or the bottom 3 buttons are parameters that I might want to get to quickly if I was on a different screen. Say I wanted to jump right to my EQ for that selected channel, I can get right to it right there without having to go to channel and then jump to EQ. So that's just a brief overview. We do have 3 DAW buttons. Nuage will control up to 3 different DAWs at the same time, and this is where you would flip between the DAWs. And so whatever one is selected or highlighted would be the DAW that Nuage is controlling at the moment. That's a brief overview of that section, and we'll move to another section. Okay, we'll move to the bottom section of the master unit. You'll notice there are various sections associated with it, such as automation, control room, monitor source. You have a transport section, and there's a blue button associated with each section. As you click that blue button, it puts those parameters up on the touch screen so you can make some adjustments. I wanted to briefly highlight what buttons are associated with each section. You notice the automation section has 8 buttons that they have placed on the unit itself that are such that we would use frequently in our sessions. And so, you know, your latch button, for example, or your fill to start or fill to end are right there, so you can access them quickly. Your control room section, you can select between 4 different monitor sources if you had 4 different types of monitors in your studio, and 4 down mixes as well that you can select between. You also have a reference level. You have control room encoder, and you also have a headphones encoder button that flips between what that encoder is. You also have solo clear, mute, a dim button there. If you move on to the monitor source, you have 8 different external inputs that you could select if you wanted to have reference or external inputs. You also have your mix section, which allows you to select your control room mix or various mixes, and you also have cue mixes for your headphone sends, and those cue up your headphones in the control room if you want to hear what's going to each headphone mix. You also have your cue section. You can mute each output, or you have parameters up on the touch screen. We'll go over that in the future. You have your user assignable section, and you have your physical keys on the surface. There's 12 of those, but you also have 96 in addition to those 12 up on the touch screen. We also have a transport section, and again you have full transport control. Here you have left and right marker locators. You have pre or post roll buttons that are physical buttons, so you can quickly get to them. Punch in or punch out. You have your cycle. You have your sync online. Any of these buttons that you would use frequently, they're right there on the surface. Also under the edit section you have 96 user assignable touchscreen keys as well, in addition to the other user assignable section. And you have cut, copy, paste, move, your object select, your range select. You also have the ability to turn snap on and off, your auto scroll, and your auto select is right there under that section. You also have a communication section. There's a couple hard user defined keys here, and also you have 12 user assignable keys on the touch screen. Yeah, you have a talkback mic, and then under that you have various things that we will get into, such as your zoom. You have a quick zoom, you have a select button, you have trim head, trim tail, fade in, fade out. All of these parameters or these functions that you would use all the time are right there on the surface. My favorite is this undo button, which is right here, and I always know where it is. I can get to it quickly. You have some arrow keys and some plus or minus keys, and then you have some modifier keys, which would be similar to what you would have on your keyboard for your computer. You have Control, Shift, and Alt, and those used in conjunction with any of these buttons here make such versatile. Make it so versatile. And then the last section, we have our numeric key section here, and that is so powerful as well. So that's just a brief overview of the master unit. We'll move over to the fader unit now and go over those buttons briefly. Okay, we've now moved over to the fader unit. We'll go over all of the buttons associated with the fader unit briefly. We'll start with the strip on the right. There's a section control unit or section, and we'll go over that briefly. We have buttons such as meter. You have a couple arrow keys, quick control, your pre. You have some routing, pan. You have sends. You also have cue mixes for your headphone mixes. You have your insert section, dynamic section, and your EQ. And you notice those parameters are shown on the screen every time you select those buttons. If I select my insert button, for example, we have buttons 1 through 8 at the top, and so what that does is allow you to select which insert slot. You can just jump quickly between those with using those buttons. Below that section we have the automation section. You can turn things on or off. We have 4 buttons associated here with the automation. You have your latch button here that we talked about on the master unit as well. You also have a preview and a punch. Below that we have workspaces. We can select up to 4 different workspaces and jump between those using those buttons. Below that section we have a control room section, which is a condensed version of what's on the master unit. We have a down mix button, we have a dim, we have level control, and you can select between headphone or control room level. And we also have a meter reset, we have a listen, and a solo clear button. Then below that we have a channel view control. This is a very powerful section that I can't wait to talk about in future tutorials. But we have 4 different channel view control user assignable keys. So if I want to save up to 4 different channel view controls, I can do that here and then jump between them. We also have the 6 buttons below that. We can highlight those and show what is visible on the fader units. So say I wanted to just see my effects channels. I can now see just my effects channels and everything else is hidden. Or if I just want to look at my groups. And so that's what those do. We have input, you have your audio channels or your output channels, your effects, your groups, or others. And then below that we have event on track, event cycle, playing channel, a selected channel, expand, and all channels. And below that we have the ability to lock a channel to the right. Let's say we want to the right or the left. Let's say we want to move the kick drum and lock it to the left. We can do that quickly and easily there. We'll talk more about that later. We can link channels, we can hide channels, and then we have a couple arrow keys associated with your bank. If I wanted to flip between banks of 8, I can do that with the arrow keys. If bank is not highlighted, I can just flip one channel at a time to the left or right. Below that we have our page control, and that's associated with, on the screen you have a meter control, and we'll show this in future tutorials, but you can use your arrow keys to jump between what you're seeing on that section on the monitor itself. And then we have some function buttons, function 1, 2, and 3. below that. Now you'll notice on the fader unit itself there are encoders, and each encoder will correspond with what is selected under the section control section. And so if we have pan selected, for example, we can now pan our various channels left or right. But if I had insert selected, I can use those to adjust parameters such as a compressor. If it's inserted, I can open that up and make adjustments there with my encoders. Below those encoders, there is a E view for edited channel view. If you select that, you can see it's a selected channel view for that channel, all of the parameters associated with it. We also have read-write automation buttons that we can turn on or off right here on the surface. We also have our arming for that channel and our monitoring for that channel. Below that we can see our channel labeling, and you can configure that a little bit differently. You can change colors and things. We have our touch slider control, and then we have a select button, we have a solo button, a mute button, and then obviously your fader. And then if we move over to the left here, we have, again, just like on the master unit, we have our DAW selected button, so we can select which DAW we're controlling. Also a main display button. And then there's a unit link button below that. What that does is if you have multiple fader units, you can either link them or unlink them. And there's various reasons you would unlink them or link them. So we'll talk about that also in other tutorials. And then you have a flips button, and you actually have two of those because you have two rows of encoders, and it associates which encoder you're flipping to right there. And then we have some modifier keys as well on the fader unit. That's it for this tutorial. Again, that was just a brief overview. We will actually go into depth in each section, and we'll release those as soon as possible, as we know that you're looking for that as well. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you have any suggestions or questions or things you'd like us to highlight or cover, please feel free to email me, Brad@pulsesound.com. And thanks for watching. We'll see you again.